Afternoon, members. I call Committee of the Whole on Bill 12. Members, thank you. Good afternoon, members. I call Committee of the Whole on Bill 12, Motor Vehicle Amendment Act 2025 to order. Minister, recognizing the Minister of Public Safety and Solicitor General, if you have any comments before we begin.
Thank you very much, Honourable Chair. I first would like to introduce the team who is joining me for committee stage. Toby Louie is Assistant Deputy Minister of Road Safety BC and Superintendent of Motor Vehicles. Stephen Roberts is the Associate Director of Driver Licensing Programs of ICBC. Connie Van Schaik is Manager of Driver Licensing Policy at ICBC, and Sharon Stewart is Executive Director of Road Safety BC, and I'd like to thank this team for all of their hard work and dedication that's led to the development and presentation of Bill 12, and also thanks in advance for their support during this committee stage. And I do have a few opening remarks that I'd like to make before we enter into debate. And in the spirit of substantial parliamentary debate focused on developing laws in our society's best interest, in this case, in the interest of road safety, there has, after second reading, been a technical briefing for some of the Conservative MLAs on the intent and some of the details in Bill 12. And I'd just like to thank the members opposite for engaging in that discussion and bringing forth your ideas and also your experience as former law enforcement as well. And certainly some of the stories that you shared as former law enforcement in the second stage and the second reading were deeply moving and a reminder about what is at stake when we are discussing road safety in our province. And I think our shared goal is to strengthen both the graduated licensing program and the motorcycle licensing program to make our roads safer for everyone. We know that graduated licensing programs do make a difference, and we want to build on the successful programs that we have here in BC by continuing to instill safe driving behaviors in new drivers. The province's proposed legislation will improve graduated licensing programs to create safer, simpler, more accessible processes for new drivers and strengthen safety standards for motorcycle riders and all road users. ICBC and Road Safety were key partners in the research, development, and implementation planning of the proposed changes to the graduated licensing program. They conducted joint consultations and formed 2 advisory working groups to guide the development of the proposed GLP and MLP models, bringing together key stakeholders and subject matter experts. During the consultations, we heard that equity, accessibility, and affordability were barriers to getting a full Class 5 license, particularly for rural and remote communities, and there was support for those we consulted for moving forward with the changes that are proposed. Significantly, the BC Association of Chiefs of Police, who were a key group engaged throughout the process, said that they support the proposed amendments to the graduated licensing program, emphasizing that the changes will improve efficiency while preserving the program's core purpose. For those going through the graduated licensing program, Bill 12 replaces a single exit checkpoint with a new additional 12-month monitoring period that includes restrictions for zero alcohol and drugs, as well as prohibitions, no driving prohibitions and suspensions. This extension means that BC will have 48 months of graduated licensing program and will be longer than most Canadian provinces for younger drivers. For new motorcyclists, we are proposing stronger rules while riders learn to ride for the protection and to enhance road safety. Like the graduated licensing program, new motorcycles will also have a monitoring and restriction period. We know that driving experience and age are the best predictors of safe driving, and these changes will give new drivers another full year behind the wheel before they can earn their full license. Not only will these changes help new drivers build safe driving behaviors, but they'll reduce barriers for earning a full license in rural and remote communities by not requiring individuals to travel long distances to complete the road test to earn their Class 5 licenses. These changes aim to reduce fatalities and serious injuries, especially among new motorcycle riders. We are looking forward to engaging in discussion with members opposite on Bill 12, and thank you in advance, and looking forward to the discussion.
Thank you, Minister. Recognizing the member for Richmond Centre. Do you have any comments?
Yeah, I just have a very short comment. Thank you to the Minister and all your staff and your ministerial staff as well. We had a good meeting just, I think, 2 weeks ago. That was a good briefing that answers some of our questions, but some of the questions we will be raising here again, just to make sure it's on record and make sure all the statistics and all the facts that we have all the information so we can either support or not to this bill. I think both sides have the same goal, is to make our roads safer, to make sure our GLP program is good for everybody, accessible for everybody, at the same time not compromising the road safety. So I'm looking forward to this session, and hopefully we can have a good result. Thank you.
Thank you. Shall Clause 1 pass? Aye. So ordered. Shall Clause 2 recognizing the member for West Kelowna Peachland?
Thank you, Chair. I just have a few questions here regarding right now, specifically the driver experience in different classes of person. First thing I'll just ask, what is the definition of classes of persons? If the Minister could just explain what that means specifically, please.
Recognizing the Minister of Public Safety and Solicitor General.
Thank you, and thank you for the question. In BC, there are different classes of driver's licenses, Class 5 and Class 7, for instance, and these question relates to subsets within those classes of groups of people. So the intention here is to create a subset of mature drivers for the purpose of advancing this bill.
Recognizing the member for West Kelowna Peachland.
Thank you, Chair. Why is Cabinet being given the power to prescribe different amounts of driving experience for different classes of persons?
Recognizing the Minister of Public Safety and Solicitor General.
Thank you. The Motor Vehicle Act, I think it's important to point out, is an older act that is structured differently than more recent legislation. And the Motor Vehicle Act does not set out specifics within the act, but rather refers to regulations. And so Bill 12 was drafted within the scheme, the existing scheme of the Motor Vehicle Act. And the supporting regulations, like one pertaining to older drivers, for instance, are developed transparently through engagement with stakeholders such as the driver training industry, Indigenous partners, and so on, and public agencies and law enforcement as well. And so it's a step in terms of the regulation that is needed to enact this bill.
Recognizing the member for West Kelowna Peachland.
Thank you, Chair. Can the minister explain what classes of persons the government envisions prescribing different experience requirements for?
Recognizing the Minister of Public Safety.
Thank you. We envision creating a class based on age to support the mature driving scheme.
West Kelowna Peachland.
Thank you, Chair. How will this be rolled out fairly to ensure that some groups are not treated unequally?
Recognizing the Minister of Public Safety and Solicitor General.
This matter is about identifying a subgroup, and so everybody within that subgroup would be treated equally and in a transparent way. And so this relates specifically to drivers over the age of 25, and they would all be treated fairly, and certainly the notions of accessibility are key to this legislation, and this particular change reflected some of the consultation feedback that we received from Indigenous stakeholders about the importance of addressing barriers to licensing for older drivers where licensing is necessary to access employment and education and other essential matters.
Shall Clause 2 pass?
More questions?
Recognizing the member for West Kelowna Peachland.
And thank you for that, Minister. Just so I'm clear, when you're speaking of class of persons being age, and you mentioned 25, is that the two thresholds, 25 and older and 25 under, or will there be other classes of person with respect to age?
Recognizing the Minister.
It will be 16 to 25 and 25 to older and older, 16 to 24 and 25 and older.
Recognizing the member for West Kelowna Peachland.
Thank you, Chair. And who previously had the ability to prescribe different amounts of driving experience to different classes of person or classes? And why now, if this passes, does Cabinet get to do so?
Recognizing the Minister of Public Safety and Solicitor General.
Thank you. ICBC has this authority within the context of the Motor Vehicle Act. And so what this will allow us to do is for Cabinet to give authority to ICBC to create distinctions within the classes of license as they relate to the subgroup drivers older than 25.
Recognizing the member for Surrey Panorama.
Thank you, Chair. Over the last little while, I've had several people come into my office between the age of 35 and 45, I would say, and they've had issues passing their driver's test. And if we recall during my speech at second reading, I did mention about coordination lacking as you get older and playing video games with the younger folk nowadays. But that leads to my question, I guess. The minister said that age is the best predictor of driver safety. So if we had a 40-year-old that's a first-time driver, do we know if that age is a predictor of safe driving, or does that age constitute a barrier to the ability to learn how to drive?
Recognizing the minister.
Thank you so much. And I think I referenced not age, but driving experience specifically being an indicator. And all drivers start with a high initial crash risk due to their inexperience as drivers. And so this risk reduces with time and practice as they experience a wider variety of situations. And ICBC insurance data indicates that new drivers aged 25 and up start with a crash risk that is 20% lower than drivers aged 16 to 24. Therefore, they are 1 year lower on the crash risk curve.
Recognizing the member for Richmond Centre.
Thank you, Honourable Chair. My question is, we talk about the age 25 quite a few times, and there might be, according to the minister, ICBC data shows that 25 years old might be more competent or might be better than the youth driver. However, in this bill, there's no mentioning of age or exactly 25. So where did this 25 come from? I'm guessing it's just by LG in council. But again, we mentioned 25 a lot, but it's not in this bill, so
Recognizing the Minister of Public Safety and Solicitor General.
Thank you so much for this question. And this is another example of the essential role that regulation plays in this case, with the Motor Vehicle Act being an older piece of legislation. And so the key details will be in regulation. And it's important, of course, for government to be transparent in terms of the planned regulations. And so when this bill was announced, we indicated that there would be a new pathway for mature drivers. And this is reflective of research and feedback that we received during the consultation. And the BC Indian Chiefs advocated for age 30 and above being the definition of the mature drivers, and which we considered. But there's a body of evidence that also indicates that brain development and impulse control is significantly different for ages 25 specifically and above. And so the decision to go with 25 reflects medical research in terms of brain development to be able to support the ultimate goal here, which is safe roads for everyone.
Recognizing the member for Richmond Centre.
Thank you, Chair. I don't disagree the age of 25. I'm just, my question is actually about how do we ensure after this bill is passed, it will be 25 or it will not be 30 or it will not change to 19 or 22. How do we know after this bill has been passed, it will be capped at the same one without coming back to our Legislative Assembly?
Recognizing the Minister of Public Safety and Solicitor General.
Yeah. It's the government's intention to create a policy pathway for this stream for drivers 25 and up.
Recognizing the member for West Kelowna Peachland.
Thank you, Chair. Now, Minister, in the introduction, you mentioned that there was support from the BC Chiefs of Police. And I think a quote, if I have it correct, was that they found it efficient. They found this amendment kept efficiency while ensuring core purpose of the amendment. So, Minister, I just want to be clear. What is the core purpose of this amendment?
Recognizing the Minister of Public Safety and Solicitor General.
So the core purpose of Bill 12 is to improve graduated licensing programs, to create safer, simpler, and more accessible programs for new drivers, and to strengthen safety standards for motorcycle drivers.
Recognizing the member for West Kelowna Peachland.
Thank you, Chair. So thank you for that, Minister. Now, I just want to make sure I understand what you're saying. So the BC Chiefs of Police Association and other policing organizations that you may have interacted with, they're supporting the safety behind this amendment. Because the quote doesn't talk about safety, it says core, ensuring the core purpose, and you stood up and said there was a safety component to the core purpose. So is it accurate to say that the BC Chiefs of Police Association doesn't have concerns with safety for the amendment?
Recognizing the Minister of Public Safety and Solicitor General.
I think it's important to note that, again, the core purpose of this legislation that is proposed is to balance accessibility with road safety. And the BC Associations of Chiefs of Police received the entire suite of materials, all materials related to this legislation, and agreed that it would reduce some barriers while not compromising road safety.
Recognizing the member for Prince George North Caribou.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. and through you to the Minister. The Constitution Act, Sections 91 and 92, deal with the division of powers, and in the division of powers for provincial purposes, it says that the purpose of licensing is to raise a provincial revenue. Is the purpose of Bill 12 public safety, or is it to raise a provincial revenue as per the Constitution?
Recognizing the Minister of Public Safety and Solicitor General.
Thank you so much. The purpose of this legislation is not to increase revenues. It's to improve accessibility to driver's license and also maintain the balance in terms of ensuring that there's road safety for all drivers in BC.
Recognizing the member for Prince George North Caribou.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Well, I appreciate the Minister's answer. However, I'm a little confused because the role of licensing in the Constitution is quite clear. It is not about safety. It is about revenue. So I don't see that the answer fits with the Canadian Constitution and its division of powers in Sections 91 and 92. Is this about raising revenue, or is this about safety? Because if it's about safety, it's not really constitutional. Thank you.
Recognizing the Minister of Public Safety and Solicitor General.
Thank you very much. This proposed legislation, like other pieces of legislation, has been drafted by government lawyers to ensure that anything put forward is indeed constitutional.
Recognizing the member for Prince George, North Caribou.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. With respect to the minister's response, this is an appeal to authority position, which really I don't think answers the question at all.
Minister, may you please allow the member to ask his question? Thank you. Not other minister, Minister of Emergency Preparedness.
So the Constitution, I think, is very clear in the division of powers. And with respect to my question, is this about raising a provincial revenue or not? It's licensing. If it's licensing, that's the purpose for licenses in this province. So what are your lawyers telling you about the purpose of this legislation? Is this about licensing or not? Because if it's not about licensing, I would say it's not constitutional.
So, member, you've asked that question now 3 times. No. Hold on a second. Thank you. 3 times in a row. If there were questions about the generality of different sections of the Constitution, perhaps that would have been better asked under Clause 1, which no one chose to ask those questions. So I just hope that you can provide better clarity for me specifically with respect to Clause 2. If you are not able to do that, we'll go on to the next person, so thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would just respond that the comments and answers by the minister have been of a general nature with regards to the purpose of the proposed bill. So I believe my question is in order, and I would dispute the point you're making, and I would probably rephrase it if it would please you to fit with that need. But I would say, what advice did the lawyers that you consulted give you about the purpose of this legislation? Did you consult with a constitutional lawyer in that regard? Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Can I just say that? So, member, I still don't see how your question is. Minister, the MLA for Prince George, North Caribou, I still don't see the relevance and connection to Clause 2. So I'm not going to allow your question. We're going to move on to, if you have another question, we can go ahead. But recognizing the Minister of Public Safety and Solicitor General.
Just if I can offer perhaps a clarifying comment, that the proposed amendments do not expand the scope of the Motor Vehicle Act outside of its constitutional jurisdiction.
Recognizing the member for West Kelowna Peachland.
Thank you, Chair. And my question is just, again, it kind of ties into the introduction that you did earlier here, Minister, but what evidence does the government have to support the claim that varying driving experience requirements will not compromise road safety?
Recognizing the Minister of Public Safety and Solicitor General.
Thank you. as I noted during my introductory comments, that second exit test is being removed and replaced with an additional 12-month restricted and monitored period. And under the proposed changes, BC will have a significantly longer graduated licensing program than the current state of our graduated licensing program. And it'll be longer than the majority of Canadian provinces for younger drivers as well. And we spoke about how evidence shows that safe driving habits demonstrated over time are a stronger predictor of long-term safety than performance in a single moment-in-time road test. And drivers must perform well during a short observed test, but they could still engage in risky behavior in real-world conditions. And so there are a couple of studies that I'll reference that support this approach. In New South Wales in Australia, a study of other exit test options found that a 2-year offense-free period was a better predictor of crash involvement, and we will have 48 months rather, scratch that, 48 months rather than 24 months. And there's also Traffic Injury Research Foundation's new graduated licensing framework that noted that a clean driving record can serve as an alternative to or complement to on-road safe exit tests and encourage higher order driving skills. And so based on the research, we believe that this extended monitoring period will go a significant way in terms of improving road safety and back to our province.
Recognizing the member for West Kelowna Peachland.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Minister, for that. You gave quite an extensive answer there. Now, I just want to hone in on a point. Now, you explained what you just explained, and that was really seemed to be more of the justification of why the movement's happening. Now, I just want to touch on another little aspect of that. What measures will be put in place to monitor and evaluate the impact of these different driver experience requirements and changes on road safety?
Recognizing the Minister of Public Safety and Solicitor General.
Thank you. And monitoring will be key in terms of supporting our understanding of the impacts of this legislation. And we'll closely track the implementation of these changes to ensure that there's safer outcomes for drivers. We'll measure results using available data, including crash rates, license completion, and driving behaviors to make sure the program is achieving its intended outcomes. And the impact of the removal of the GLP exit test will also be evaluated and monitored to confirm that it aligns with the safety goals and best practices, and if changes are required as well. And we used a similar approach, in fact, when we introduced the graduated licensing program here in BC. Continuous monitoring will allow for adjustments over time and ensure that the licensing system evolves based on what actually improves road safety. And I understand that it takes approximately 5 years to collect meaningful data, and so will be a planned evaluation of the program as well at that 5-year mark to determine if any changes are necessary.
Recognizing the member for West Kelowna Peachland.
Thank you, Chair. Just a quick follow-up to that. Will that, all the things you just described, will that be just in-house kind of government ICBC data, or will that be disclosed to the public?
Recognizing the Minister of Public Safety and Solicitor General.
The evaluation was planned to be internal, but data is published by Road Safety BC and ICBC on crash rates on an annual basis, and this will certainly be continued.
Recognizing the member for Richmond Centre.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Minister, for all the answers. You mentioned about no prohibition in the additional 1 year or within that 3-year period. Does that mean just no tickets or no prohibition? Because tickets doesn't automatically goes to prohibition. Can you be specific how many tickets they can get in 1 year or excessive, or how does that work?
Recognizing the Minister of Public Safety and Solicitor General.
It's those chairs. Double entendre. Certainly there will be a continuation of the zero alcohol and zero drugs for new drivers, and it's important to note that those in the graduated licensing program are held to a higher standard than other drivers, and that will continue to be the case.
Recognizing the member for Richmond Centre.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you to Minister, but my question was, is there more specific? I know you mentioned zero alcohol, higher standard. What does higher standard means? Like, if they get a speeding ticket, will that extend it, or if it would stay the same? Or do they have to get an excessive speeding ticket or distracted driving tickets or 2 or 3 speeding tickets plus? We just want that information there.
Recognizing the Minister of Public Safety and Solicitor General.
So novice drivers, as I noted, are held to a higher standard, and specifically 9 points are required for somebody from the general population before an intervention is made, but for novice drivers that is 2 points. And the interventions can range depending on the offense, so it could be a warning letter, for instance, to a full prohibition of driving. And really the purpose here is to ensure that any dangerous driving behaviors are nipped and stopped before they become habit.
Member for Richmond Centre.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you to the Minister. Thanks for the specific answer for 2 points. What I believe speeding ticket is a 3 points. In the previous or in the existing one, even the novice driver with a speeding ticket would not receive a prohibition. Does that mean in the new one, a simple speeding ticket will get a prohibition and that extend or restart the novice period?
Recognizing the Minister.
There is not a plan to change any of the existing points threshold, but there is the additional 12 months of monitoring as part of this program.
Shall clause recognizing the member for Richmond Centre.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you to the Minister. You also mentioned there's studies in overseas that offense is actually a better indicator than a test. Can you tell us what's the passing rate of the exit test, the second test right now?
Exit test has nothing to do with experience. I guess it has something to do with experience. Recognizing the Minister of Public Safety and Solicitor General.
Thank you. The data we have from ICBC shows that an average of 64,000 GLP exit tests are taken each year, with an overall pass rate of 68%, and that 94% pass within 2 tries.
Recognizing the member for Richmond Centre.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you to the Minister. So just to follow up on that question, so 68% people pass on the first try. And that's, if my math is correct, that's about 20, or that's 32% did not pass. So without the second exit test now, after if this bill is passed, how do we ensure those 32% people will not be harming or reducing our road safety?
I just ask that the member for Richmond Centre just clarify this question, just for my understanding, and its relevance and connection to Clause 2.
Yeah, so it is, because in Clause 2, it mentioned, especially in LG Council, can actually prescribe different amounts. So in this Act, there's no actual number of what I mentioned, for example, age of 25, or there's no mentioning of exit tests, removal, and there's no mentioning of all the stuff that we mentioned. So it is very important for us to actually be on record to understand what's the changes. Or else, after we pass this pass this bill, under LG in Council, they can just change anything. So it is very clear that we have to make sure all British Columbians know what's the changes in the future. Thanks.
Thank you.
Solicitor General.
Thank you very much, Honourable Chair. And following up on the comment of the recently departed Chair, I think the question may relate to Clause 3 specifically. So I'm not sure if we're at the point that we want to potentially vote on Clause 2 and then move on to discussing Clause 3, where we can get into this matter further.
Member.
Chair, welcome to the seat. I don't disagree, and I can let you go to the Clause 2 voting. Yeah.
Shall toss 2 pass? Oh. Aye. All right. Shall clause, so ordered, shall Clause 3 pass? Aye. Member?
Well, now we need to ask more questions, since the Minister said we can ask more questions based on Clause 3. Maybe back to my original question, which the Minister now would have a chance to actually answer. Under the test, how are we going to ensure that 32% of the people who failed their first test is not going to endanger our road?
Solicitor General.
Thank you. As we've discussed previously, a road test is really a moment in time snapshot, and it measures how somebody drives in a given 20 minutes or so under controlled conditions, not how they drive each and every day. And so research shows, in fact, that drivers often perform better when observed, making risky behaviors, masking rather risky behaviors that may appear in real-world driving. And it's also important to note that failing the exit road test makes no difference today to road safety, that these drivers still, after failing the test, go home from the test and to continue to drive with their existing restrictions until, if ever, they choose to sit and retake and pass the road test. And so that's why we've been emphasizing the importance of the additional 12 months of monitoring being a stronger indicator than a moment in time driving test.
Recognizing the member for Richmond Center.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you to Minister. Respectfully, I disagree that a test is not an indication of their driving ability, because that's what the test is for, including when we go into university, there are tests we have to do. When we pass a course, we have to go into an exam. So no different from driving. And also, I partially agree that they can, under the existing test, they can still drive as for Class 7, even if they failed the exit test. But don't forget, we have a restriction on them, which is also zero alcohol, for example. And also, they cannot drive to the full capacity of the car. They can only drive one person. So that is a harm reduction approach from my standpoint with the existing restriction. So again, to the Minister, with that high failing rate of 32%, just because now we move on to a no prohibition or no ticket, and automatically they can get the full license after an additional 12 months, how are we ensuring those 32% will not get their full license compared to their existing case? With right now, they will have restriction, they cannot drive like 5 people in a car. How do we make sure that the harm is reduced like now?
Just ask this question. Recognizing the Minister of Public Safety and Solicitor General.
Thank you. And just to clarify, I don't believe that I said that a road test was not an indicator, but that monitoring based on the evidence is a better indicator of habits over time. And so the graduated licensing program, of course, has a road test as a core component, and that will be maintained. And I think it's important to note that only 3 jurisdictions currently, British Columbia, Ontario, and New Zealand, require a second road test. Alberta also had one, removed theirs last year, and New Zealand is planning to remove theirs in 2026. And in part, this is because there is simply no evidence that the second road test improves road safety. Because so few places use one, there have been no credible evaluations showing that exit testing reduces crashes or makes drivers safer.
Recognizing the member for Richmond Center.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you to Minister. So I just want to clarify, is it because of no data, because there's only so few jurisdiction, or is it because the data shows that we can actually take out the second test? Very, very different. Thanks.
recognizing the Minister of Public Safety and Solicitor General.
Thank you very much. Based on available data and available research, the data shows that an extended monitoring time is the best predictor of driver safety, road safety.
Recognizing the member for Richmond Centre.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you to the Minister. My next question, which kind of move on, is about people who don't drive a lot or drive rarely after they pass the first test. Under the existing law, they will still have to go through the second test, or else they would always be carrying the restriction of a new driver, of a novice driver. But under the new proposed change, these people who rarely drive will automatically get a full license. How are we going to ensure the road safety for these people?
Recognizing the Minister of Public Safety and Solicitor General.
Thank you very much. I think it's important to note that the drivers that the member references who may not be frequent drivers have still passed their knowledge test and their first road test. And in fact, ICBC data shows us that approximately 25% of people choose not to exit the GLP program at all. And that there are long-term Class 7 drivers who have held a license for 25 years. And these drivers continue to drive on the novice license, sometimes even after failing the Class 5 GLP exit test. And this does not mean that we don't do anything. In fact, that we continue to monitor all drivers and have initiatives such as the Driver Improvement Program to be able to catch risky behavior and correct it.
Recognizing the member for Richmond Centre.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you to the Minister. So do you have the statistic of novice driver versus full licensed driver crash rate? Is novice driver usually higher than full license?
Minister.
Thank you so much. The data that we have shows that drivers' experience over time is what reduces crash rates. And that we also know that drivers over the age of 25 and up have a 20% reduced crash rate than drivers 16 to 24. So it really speaks to the importance of driving experience and the fact that the driving monitoring program provides additional opportunity with those additional 12 months of monitored driving to monitor and potentially intervene on any infractions.
Minister, I think we want a 10 minutes recess break,
okay.
but we will continue after this. Yeah.
Yep, we're going to call a 10-minute recess at this time. So this group, I recognize there's a lot of transition happening, but if you can advise your counterparts that I expect them back in their seats, that would be great. Thank you. Good afternoon, committee. I call the Committee of the Whole on Bill 12, Motor Vehicle Amendment Act 2025 back to order. We are on Clause 3. On Clause 3, recognizing the member from, whoops, I've lost my list. Richmond Centre, thank you so much.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you to the Minister prior to the answers prior to our recess. She gave me a very comprehensive data on a crash rate of age and based on age and experience. But I'm also interested in the data on the accident rate on novice versus full driver license accident rates. Do you guys have that data? If yes, we would love to have that. If not, we can also request it at another time. Thank you.
Minister.
Thank you very much. We do not have that data on hand today, but we'd be happy to provide it and follow up.
Member.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you to the Minister. I'm not sure mine if it's up to date, but what I found on ICBC based on the 2024 release was new drivers, novice driver, was 8 times more likely to be involved in a fatal crash than a full license driver. And 18% of drivers speeding in casualty crash was age of 16-21, which only makes up to 6%. And in 2023 release, novice drivers are 1.5 times more likely to crash than full drivers driving with a full licensed driver. So I just want to make sure that statistic is correct. Maybe the ministry can actually give us a full data tomorrow or later on. But my other question is that because the test will be one test, the exit test will be gone, will there be any changes to the first test or first and only test? Thank you.
Minister.
Thank you very much for the question about testing specifically. ICBC continuously reviews the Class 7 road test used for a driver to move from the learner period to the novice period to ensure that it continues to support rigorous testing and road safety. And a number of improvements are being planned to the Class 7 road test, including creating more time for the driver examiner, coaching and feedback, changing the road test scoring and evaluation to make it easier for drivers to understand, and moving from paper records to digital road test scoring as well.
Member.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you to Minister. I just want to clarify, so there will be more time for the first and only test after, if this bill has been passed, because the second test has been removed. And I just want to confirm that, for example, right now, there's a highway portion, at least in the Richmond Road Test Center. I'm presuming that the second test component will now be incorporated into the first test component, and more time, the more exam time will be added to the first and only test after this bill is passed. Thank you.
Minister.
Thank you very much. And in terms of the question about duration, that and other aspects of the test will continue to be monitored by ICBC to ensure that the testing is rigorous. And I thank you, and you're not the first person to mention the highway driving component that you've experienced in your second test in Richmond. It is important to note that highway driving is not required. It's optional on an exit test, including the second exit test, because in practice, traffic density and testing locations around the province challenge the ability to assess this fairly if it was and consistently if it was a requirement. And so, in fact, the majority of Canadian jurisdictions don't require a high speed roadway component to the road test. So ICBC designs their testing routes to ensure driver examiners have confidence in a number of maneuvers conducted during the test to place qualified drivers on the road. But it doesn't include a mandatory highway portion.
Member.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you to the Minister. So I just want to combine the two questions and two answers. Simpler, is there any changes to the first and only tests after this bill is passed? Because you mentioned that the highway component might be only specific to different region or different cities. But so in general, after this bill is passed, will we see any changes to the first and only test compared to right now the Class 7 test?
Oh, sorry.
Minister, thank you for through
Thank
the
you so
chair.
much. I'll just recap my answer of a couple questions ago to say that ICBC continually reviews the Class 7 road test, and that we're looking, ICBC is looking at a number of potential improvements, including the duration and incorporating more driver examiner, more time for coaching and feedback in that test as well, and using digital road test scoring.
Member.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you to Minister. So what I hear the answer is that we will be just letting ICBC will be monitoring and may or may not make improvement to the test according to the monitoring situation. I hope that's correct. And now my colleague have some questions. He can continue. Thank you.
Recognizing the member from West Kelowna Peachland.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to switch gears to other prescribed considerations under the new Section 25, Sub 10, Sub F. How will other prescribed considerations be defined? Like, what does that mean, other prescribed considerations?
Minister.
Just a question, so I make sure that we're scrutinizing the right piece of the draft legislation. Can you specify the section and the phrase that you're asking about?
Just have.
Go ahead, member.
Yes, so I have it down here as in my notes as Section 25, Sub 10, Sub F, where it's other prescribed considerations. It says in the bill. Hang on.
Minister.
Thank you so much. So if we understand the question correctly, this corresponds to Section 23 2C of the current Act, which uses the phrase "other prescribed means." And this relates to, and the difference is that Section 23 2 and 2.1 are about ICBC assessing the out-of-province driver's skills or qualifications to determine which class of license, a BC license they may qualify for, and determining whether restrictions such as zero blood alcohol content would apply to the new Class 5 or 6 license being issued to the out-of-province driver.
Member.
And thank you, Chair, and thank you, Minister. There was a bit of a confusion there, I think, on my part, so I apologize for that. But moving on, how will ICBC verify the validity of out-of-province driving records before allowing individuals to bypass BC testing requirements?
Minister.
Thank you. With this legislation, there is no change to how ICBC assesses out-of-province driving records today.
Member.
Sort of to follow up on that, can ICBC then, with the determination of whether a class license transfers over to a similar class in BC, can they currently determine that? Are they under that practice right now of transferring over a comparable class?
Minister.
Yes, there is a policy that is available on the website, and that is the current practice today.
Member.
Thank you, Chair. I would like to move the amendment that stands in my name on the order paper.
Members of the committee, we have an amendment to Clause 3, and that amendment can be found on your order paper on page 2, and you should have had the opportunity to review that. So, on the amendment, would you like to speak to the amendment, please?
Yes, thank you, Chair. I would like to just start off with talking about the history on this. I think we all know or could remember the JIBC incident with the data leaks. People were finding out the people that worked at the Justice Institute and harassing them at their homes. I will tell on myself, and that's from the Lower Mainland, but the interior towns and cities of British Columbia, when I was working in a small town, I had arrested a drug dealer, which we'll call him a drug dealer, on a day, and the next day he was being released as I was getting off duty. He asked for a ride home from me, and I said, "I'm not giving you a ride home," and his answer was, "Well, you only live 2 blocks from me." So, these things do come up, and they're small towns, large towns. They need to be addressed at some point. The BC Police Association has been asking. They said for 17 years for this to be addressed within the law. They feel that most people involved in the justice system need to be protected. They need some safeguards so that they can perform their duties without fear of retribution from somebody. And if I can, I will just read from their submission when they were visiting before. The current Insurance Corporation of BC regulations allow individuals to access home address information of police officers, judges, and public officials through vehicle registration records. This presents a significant and unnecessary risk to personal safety. In today's climate of increased threats, doxing, and online harassment, BC lags behind other provinces that have implemented safeguards to protect the identities and residents of those working in public service roles. Without reform, this loophole remains open to misuse by bad actors, including organized crime and extremist groups. So it's not just the people as well. It's, you know, it extends to their families and everybody involved. So in this amendment, I've added in people with the justice system while leaving room for regulation to be added for other people that the current government wishes to add to this protection.
Minister.
I'd like to thank the member opposite for the proposed amendment, and especially for sharing his personal experience and also the submission that really speaks to the very real and serious safety concerns of law enforcement and others who dedicate their lives to keeping our communities safe. And certainly the safety and security of certain people, the need for anonymity is vitally important and a very complex issue as well. It is our view that the proposed amendments, though they relate to something very, very important, are beyond the scope of Bill 12 and should, because of that, be determined to be out of order. The proposed amendments in Bill 12 relate to Section 25 of the Motor Vehicle Act, and specifically the Graduated and Motorcycle Licensing Program. And so the proposed amendment on whether to exempt certain classes of people from the requirements to provide a residential address is not specifically related to the licensing programs that we are looking at in the context of this bill. And so for this reason, I ask that the proposed amendments be ruled out of order.
Member?
Yeah. Under the current bill, this is the same section that is talking about the licensing program, but in that it prescribes where you have to present your address on your driver's license information. So it does directly apply within this. It's not part of the changes that are part of Bill 12, but they are within the sections that are being addressed within this. And anybody doing licensing has to follow the issues around listing your home address at this point, or if we go with the amendment of changing up the where you can place an address at your work address.
So, having discussed whether this is in order or out of order, it is the ruling of the chair that this is in fact out of order in this bill, perhaps to be brought forward at another time, and certainly for further discussion with the ministry. Thank you so much, member, for bringing this forward. So now we shall continue with Clause 3. So on Clause 3, recognizing the member from West Kelowna Peachland.
Thank you, Chair. Continue on with my questions here. How will ICBC determine equivalency between jurisdictions? Will there be public transparency about which jurisdictions are considered comparable?
Minister.
To reiterate, I think a response that I offered earlier, that there is no change to ICBC's practice of recognizing licensing from other jurisdictions, and their policy is transparent and available on the ICBC website as well.
Member.
Thank you, Chair. So how will the government ensure that driver education courses approved under this act meet a rigorous, consistent standard across all licensed training schools?
Minister.
Thank you for the question about driver training. And there's no change to how this will be approached. And ICBC currently has a structure in place to oversee approved driver training in BC, which includes licensing and certification of driver training schools and also course approval. And to ensure oversight and compliance, ICBC has school inspectors and investigators who conduct regular inspections of schools and certification facilities. They evaluate course delivery, assess training officers, investigate any complaints, and they also have the authority to issue compliance notices or tickets for violation of the Motor Vehicle Act regulations. And so these practices will continue in the proposed legislation.
Member.
Thank you, Chair. Will ICBC publish annual statistics showing how many drivers advance without testing compared to with testing in previous years and their comparative safety outcomes?
Minister.
Thank you. There is a commitment that ICBC will monitor and evaluate these changes as I referenced, and that crash data will continue to be published by ICBC on an annual basis.
Member.
Thank you, Chair. So, and my next question here, how will the government ensure that the new regulation-making authority regarding the issuance of licenses and the imposition of conditions does not lead to arbitrary or inconsistent decisions? Yes, so how will the government ensure that the new regulation-making authority that's coming in this act regarding issuance of licenses and imposition of the conditions doesn't lead to arbitrary or inconsistent decisions? Thank you.
Minister.
Thank you very much. I'll start by saying that providing ICBC discretionary authority to make decisions to administer driver licensing is not new. That is already established, and that ICBC has been exercising their discretionary authority for driver licensing matters under the Motor Vehicle Act for decades, and since they assumed responsibility for driver licensing, and that will continue. And if there are any concerns about an ICBC driver licensing decision, that concern can and will continue to be able to be raised with ICBC's fairness officer, who reports to the minister responsible for the corporation and is appointed by the government. So that process to address any concerns remains.
Recognizing the member from Richmond Centre.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you to the Minister. So just my quick question is, if ICBC have the full power of the discretionary power right now in the existing act, why do we need these changes then?
Minister.
So as we've noted, ICBC has these authorities under the Motor Vehicle Act, and because we're making changes to the GLP program, we need to ensure that ICBC has the authority to act in accordance with these prescribed changes, such as the new pathway for mature drivers.
Member.
Thank you, Chair. And thank you, Minister, for the response. Now, prior to the last answer you just provided, you mentioned a step that's in place for a driver or someone that's licensed if basically like a complaint or some kind of appeal process. You mentioned that process. I appreciate that. I just want to cover off another avenue in that world of basically what safeguards are in place or will be in place here to prevent the misuse of this regulation-making authority and to ensure that it prioritizes road safety.
Minister.
Thank you very much for the questions relating to safeguards. And I'll reiterate that there is ICBC's Fairness Officer who reports to the minister responsible that is, in this case, is the Attorney General. Concerns can also be raised to the ombudsperson, could be raised directly to the minister responsible, the AG, or even an MLA who can advocate further. There's also within the current Motor Vehicle Act an appeal provision under section 1.18.
Member.
Thank you, Chair. My next question, what criteria will be used to determine the minimum waiting period for novice drivers, and how will this period be enforced to ensure it contributes to road safety?
Minister.
Thank you. We are not planning on changing any minimum period for drivers age 16 to 24. So the only change is to the mature pathway, which is based on the evidence and consultations that I referenced.
Member.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for the clarity there, Minister. Now, I just want to be, we've gone to this age 25 thing a few times. I just want to ask something specific to this topic of the minimum waiting period. So if a person is 16, they don't get their license, they go through, they do their thing, or maybe they have their learners and they're not driving at all. There's no indication that they've done other tests, they've done nothing, they just show up, they're 25 years old. And so they have the age, but they haven't driven. Is there anything in this minimum waiting period or anything in the Act that differentiates between someone 25, not just you've met the age and then we're giving you your license, or is there something that you could say, well, you've driven and here's the data that shows, or the proof that you've done all this driving experience? Is there a difference between the two?
Minister.
Thank you. I think it's important to point out that regardless of age, there's the requirement to pass the knowledge test and the road test. And a driver completes the graduate licensing program at the age the driver starts the program. So if you're 16, you are completing the stream for 16 to 24-year-olds, but if you are 25, you would follow the pathway for mature drivers.
Member.
Thank you, Chair. So I just want to be clear on this point because I think there's a bit of a change, obviously, from 16 going up and getting your full Class 5, and the age 25 obviously is significant with this. So I just want to be clear. So I guess there's, and correct me if I'm wrong here on this. So the way I'm understanding what you're saying is that there's we'll call it the original path, where you have 16, you get your learners, you go through, you become 18, 19, you continue on, and you might get your Class 5. Or the other option is you have to do your knowledge test and maybe like your learners, and maybe you don't do your learners. But the other option is you don't do any of that stuff. You just turn 25, and there's a different process then to get your license. You don't have to do the other things. And the second part of that question would be, if that's the case, what does it look like? Like, can you explain when you're 25, what happens when you're 25? And I think more to hone in on what I'm asking is it like a hybrid where there's part of the learners and all this stuff getting to 25? You have to have some benchmark met, or is it just, hey, it's your 25th birthday, you've never driven before, and here, because you're mature, here you now have your license, if that makes sense?
Minister.
Thank you for the question, and maybe to answer in a comprehensive way, I can walk the member through the phase-based approach that will be followed. And so for those that are age 16 to 24, there is the knowledge test to acquire the learner's license that has to be held for 12 months before going for the Class 7 novice license, which requires 24 months or 18 months if you take approved training. And after that period, there's the Class 5 license, which includes the additional 12 months of monitoring, which is an important aspect of the proposed changes. And for drivers that are mature, age 25 plus, there is still the knowledge test to receive the learner's license. The period is 9 months before one takes the test for the Class 7 novice license. So it's a 9-month period, and then 12 months with the Class 7 novice license, and an additional 12 months of monitoring period. And I think it's also important to note that after receiving one's learner's license, you have to proceed with the test in 2 years. Otherwise, you have to retake that knowledge test and restart that process.
Member.
Thank you, Chair. So my follow-up questions to this would be, what measures will be taken to evaluate the effectiveness of these driver education courses in reducing crash rates and improving road safety?
Minister.
Thank you. I'll begin by affirming that driver training schools play an important role in developing safe driving behaviors for new drivers, and they have been key partners who have key insights on what students need to build safe driving habits. And that's why industry representatives from driver training programs have been at the table during the consultation progress and have supported the modernization of the graduated license programming in BC. And there will be no changes to how driver education is monitored. And that process that I outlined, I think, in an earlier answer, that we have to oversee approved driver training programs in BC, course approval and licensing and certification of driver training schools remain unchanged.
Member.
Thank you. Thank you, Minister. What specific incentives will be provided to encourage new drivers to enroll in ICBC-approved driver training programs, especially in rural and remote areas?
Minute. Minister.
Thank you to the member for the question. And incentives are province-wide and not specific to regions. And the current GLP program provides a reduction in time in the novice phase if they complete an approved GLP test within 1 year or 12 months of getting their learner's license. And we are not changing this incentive for drivers under the age of 25. 90% of drivers that take advantage of this incentive are aged 16 to 19. And as we are reducing the GLP requirement for those over 25, there will not be an incentive to further reduce the time requirements. And so we don't want a further reduction in the time requirements that could negatively impact road safety.
Member.
Okay, thank you, Chair. How will the government address the cost barriers associated with driver training programs to ensure that all new drivers can access high-quality training?
Minister.
Thank you to the member for the question. BC has over 1,300 driver training schools and over 3,700 licensed instructors across the province. We know that BC driver training schools offer a range of training from on-road sessions to fully approved graduated license program courses. The GLP programs, which are used, as we know, across Canada, as well as internationally, build skills over time through learner and novice stations. And these systems, the graduate licensing program, are proven to reduce crashes, even for those who don't take formal driving training. Some reasons why driver education is not mandatory includes a need to have a balance between affordability, safety, fairness, and practicality. And provinces know that the right driver education can help, but we also don't want to make driving more expensive and inaccessible, especially for youth and rural residents.
Member.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for the response, Minister. I just want to tie back to something very early on in our conversation today. We talked about other jurisdictions. We talked about some stats from outside of BC and across the country. And I just want to tie it into our conversation we're having right now about driver education and incentives. So with all the things we've just discussed here right now on this driver education and these incentives, my question is, with what you've mentioned about things having to be kind of consistent, and you mentioned that the incentive currently is it reduces the amount of time that you're driving for. I forget the numbers exactly, but if you have, let's say, 12 months, it gets reduced down to 9 months because you've done the course, something to that effect anyway. I'm wondering, because when you look at other jurisdictions in the country, other jurisdictions that are, as you've mentioned, are doing things like this, and that's you're wanting to monetize it to be what others are doing. What they're doing in some jurisdictions is they're actually providing an incentive more than what you said to the driver. So it's not just they reduce your time with your restrictions, but they might actually reduce the cost of your insurance or other things that make it less cost prohibitive for their citizens to actually get more experience and training. With this act, or at any time when you were considering this, was that looked at and considered by the province? And if it wasn't, why not?
Minister.
Thank you. This was, in fact, carefully considered and studied with available evidence, and there, in fact, wasn't enough evidence about that suggests that driver training decreases crashes to be able to justify that reduction in insurance rates.
Member.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to be clear. So when you say there wasn't enough evidence or data or whatever, was that BC evidence and data, or were you looking to these other jurisdictions that have this currently implemented, and that was the finding? Just want to be clear.
Through the chair next time, if you don't mind, Minister.
I'm so sorry.
Minister.
I should know better.
No worry. No. Member.
Thank you, Minister, and thank you, Chair. Just regarding that, when you mention driving schools, statistically actually gives the driver, especially young driver and novice driver, a better skill, better ability to drive. But at the same time, you mentioned the data shows, or there's no data shows that they reduce crash rates so that they can reduce their insurance costs. Why is there such discrepancy when they are supposed to save a driver and reduce crash rate, but at the same time they cannot have a reduction in insurance costs? Thank you.
Minister.
Thank you very much, Chair. And so there's, and I don't think I said that the driver training had no impact. And certainly we've spoken about the evidence of the graduated licensing program and the benefits of training. But nonetheless, there has not been a determination of significant impact that would justify reduction of ICBC rates.
Recognizing the member from West Kelowna Peachland.
Perfect. Thank you, Chair. And I just want to state one thing with what you said about the data, ICBC data. You know, considering that we were, through our conversation here, we've been looking at what other jurisdictions are doing, and we're wanting to get more in line according to this amendment with what other jurisdictions are doing. But then when we look at the incentive potentially of making it more readily available to British Columbians to actually get the driver training and get the incentive through insurance, we're not looking at their data then. We're just looking at BC data and saying, no, the data doesn't show anything. I really wonder what data across the country or the other countries and jurisdictions that you cited earlier today, I wonder what their data would say about that. I'll move to my next question though. What criteria will be used to determine the conditions imposed on different classes of persons, and how will these conditions be monitored and enforced?
Minister.
Thank you, Chair. The only difference is around age, so whether a group of persons is in 16 to 24 or 25 and up.
Recognizing the member from Richmond Centre.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you to the Minister. Back to the insurance rate, not exactly the same question, but under the new, if this bill has been passed, the current N driver, which you mentioned there are, 25% of N drivers still doing N, but then they have been driven for more than 4, 5, 10, 25 years maybe. So those people will automatically get a full license, as long as they have not have infractions or prohibition and stuff like that. Have you guys looked into, maybe my first question is, does N driver usually has a higher insurance rate than Class 5 license first? If so, then all those N that suddenly graduated, will they all have a drop in their insurance rate, and does that impact ICBC finances? Thank you.
Minister.
I'll offer that there are a number of factors that determine insurance rate. The driving experience and the age are among those factors, but there are others in terms of type of vehicle, location, and so the insurance rates are determined by factors that are broader than what we're discussing today.
Member.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, the Minister. I do understand that from different area, there are many factors to the insurance rate, but keeping all factors the same, does an equal driving experience, like years of driving experience driver, but with an N to it, does it has a higher insurance rate than the full license, given that the same they drove for 15 years, let's say? Because as you mentioned, there are many N driver has their N for so long, but they're not taking their Class 5 license. So.
Minister.
Thank you, Chair. Any questions around insurance rates, I believe are better directed to the minister responsible, so in this case, the Attorney General.
Member.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you to the Minister. There's a high, the reason that we asked is about the change in GLP. And the change in GLP will lead to this consequence. So if possible, I would love to have that answer maybe, well, today is already 6:06, so if possible, we can get that answer tomorrow. And because we will be suddenly having tens of thousands of N drivers suddenly graduate into full license after this bill has passed. So this consequence can be big for our province. It can be big on our road, not just on road safety, but also on ICBC. So I would really want the minister to actually understand the reason why I asked and maybe unintended consequence behind this. But since we couldn't get this answer today, I do have another questions for the minister. We understand the change to the GLP is to have it's more accessible for people in British Columbia, especially Indigenous communities, and maybe to the north or in the rural area. But if capacity is a problem, why didn't we, or why can't we expand the examiner or mobile testing and mobile testing sites like that? Thank you.
Minister.
Thank you for your question that relates to accessibility, which is really one of the key factors that we're addressing with this legislation. And in fact, there are already some examples of mobile testing available in rural remote areas, specifically for the knowledge test.
Member.
Yeah, well, my question is, I understand there's already mobile testing, for example, for the road tests, for the knowledge tests currently. But what my question was, if the capacity is a problem, accessibility is a problem, instead of removing or streamlining or make it more efficient, as you mentioned, why don't we keep the second test but increase the capacity on road testing?
Minister.
Thank you, Chair. And the changes that we're making are not around addressing capacity, but it's modernizing the program and aligning with evidence that shows that an extended monitoring period is a better predictor of safe driving. And so I think just to reiterate, one of the key elements of this legislation is to replace that point of time road test with the extended length of time of monitoring by 12 months. And not only will these changes help build safer driving behaviors, but they will reduce barriers to obtaining a full license in rural and remote communities by not requiring individuals to travel long distances to complete the road test and earn their Class 5 license.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you to the Minister. Asking about Class 3A, we can see ICBC actually can do many stuff. One or more. Knowledge test, road signs, or signal tests is one or more. So my question is, why ICBC, the insurance corporation, is giving the ultimate discrepancy to set all these test standards after this bill is passed, and they basically have the ultimate power to change anything in testing. So why are we giving that ultimate power to them instead of keeping it in this House? Thank you.
For a quick answer, that the ICBC already has this authority. This doesn't change the authority granted to ICBC. It confirms what they're able to do in relation to the changes to the graduated licensing program outlined in the bill. And noting the time, I do move that the committee rise, report progress, and ask leave to sit again.
Members, you have heard the question. Those in favor indicate aye. Aye. Those opposed indicate nay. This motion is carried and the committee stands adjourned. Thank you so much.